I think we can begin if you all agree to it, and more people may join along the way. Okay, great. So, welcome. Thank you all for being here today. We are very proud to present the second edition of ILSA Diplomacy Days. My name is Camelia Ores, and I will be co-moderating today's event with my fellow colleague Altamash Khalil.
Thank you, Cami. Hello, everyone. My name is Altamash Khalil. So, welcome, everyone, and welcome, Your Excellency. Thank you so very much again for accepting the invitation and being here with us today. So, before we move on, I'd like to briefly present what our organization, the ILSA The Hague Chapter, does. So, ILSA The Hague Chapter is a study association within the Hague University of Applied Sciences, and particularly within the International and European Law Program. The purpose of our association is to promote the study, profession, and development of international law, and we strive to achieve our goals through the efforts of ILSA supporters, our members, and the cooperation of various subgroups within ILSA. These subgroups are the Main Events Committee, the Social Events Committee, the ILSA Journal Committee, and the ILSA Ambassadors team. Thank you so very much again, and enjoy today's session, everyone.
Thank you, Altamash. Now moving on to officially commencing today's event. Just quickly for our attendees, we would like to tell you how today's event is going to go. So for the beginning, His Excellency will make a brief presentation about his country and position as a diplomat, followed by a number of questions in the form of a dialogue from our side. And lastly, the floor will be open to questions from the public. We would like to warmly welcome today's honored guest. He has a vast experience in international relationships and diplomacy. Amongst other distinguished positions, he was the deputy head in London, and he was awarded the Commander Grand Cross for the Order of the Finnish Lion. It is with great pleasure that we would like to welcome the Ambassador of Romania to the Netherlands, Mr. Lucian Fătu. Bună ziua, domnule ambasador, vă mulțumim pentru prezență. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, bună ziua tuturor. I'm glad, and I admit a little bit nervous, which is refreshing at my age, to be with you today. And from the outset, I would like to say that this type of interactions is probably one of the most refreshing and fruitful activities I conduct in the field of public diplomacy, which is a very important branch of today's diplomatic work. Why is that? Because people like you, people your age, are probably the most open, the most permeable to ideas, to learning about countries, about people, about professions. And I think it is worthwhile for me also to listen to you and to understand your issues, your points of interest, and also your expertise, your experience, which maybe you're not aware of, but is something that my generation and generations ahead of me count as their future options for a healthy and sustainable life. As our co-moderators today mentioned, I would like to very briefly say a few things about Romania, which I hope will not cover things that you already know, things that are of general knowledge. Then 2 or 3 words about myself. Third point, a few, I would say, random thoughts, but I would say things of relevance to anyone interested in this field of activity. And the pièce de résistance, the discussion, the interaction, and I'm encouraging you to be as open, as straightforward, and as merciless as possible in asking me anything you think is of interest. You have in your presentation for today's event a few words about Romania. I don't want to repeat them. what I would like to say is that my country is located in Southeastern Europe, and the interesting thing about Romanians is that we are Latin people among Slavic and Finno-Ugric people. The Finno-Ugric group of people is obviously represented by the Hungarians. During the formation of the Romanian people, there was an interaction which is basically the recipe for the formation of all European peoples, more or less according to history and geography. So to a certain point, if I may be a little bit oversimplifying and maybe a little bit cynical, when you think about countries, you have to think very carefully about geography, but because geography means a lot for a country, marks its history, marks its mentalities, marks the people's moral character, traditions, and in the end, historical evolution. Romania is about the size of the Netherlands in terms of population, but about 5 times larger in terms of square kilometers. Whereas here we live in a flat land where the sea, the canals, the water, fresh water are the main ingredients of the landscape. Romania is quite balanced between flatlands and high mountains, rivers, and the sea, that we are bordering the Black Sea. And the thing that is unique for Europe is the Danube Delta, the flowing of Delta, the Danube, the river Danube into the sea, which is a very interested, unique landscape for animals and nature lovers, for its unique mingle of fresh water, sour water, and of course salty water. Sorry, and of course the vegetation. More about Romania, if you're interested, I'm ready to talk to you about about our current condition as EU and NATO members, and the current very strong relationship between Romania and the Netherlands, which lays on a very strong pillar of economic, trade, and investment cooperation. The Netherlands is the first investor in Romania, considering their place of residence of capital. You know that some countries, some investors come from one country, but they have residence in another country. It's a little bit technical, but the Netherlands, according to this criteria, to place of residence of the investors, ranks the first in the Romanian economic investment landscape. Again, more if you are interested in. I myself am an engineer by training, so although I strongly recommend the law profession as the most suitable for diplomacy, my profession is one open to various backgrounds, on the condition that you like to learn a lot about foreign people, foreign affairs. You have the ability, which in your case, in your age, ranks from 2, 3 to maybe 6, 7 languages. In my time, when I started, English and French were enough. These are considered still the most important, the most well represented languages in the EU. But of course, German is the language of the most powerful economic and investment powerhouse in Europe. So foreign languages are enough, and a few moral traces that I think you, as students of international law, have. And I will talk about that a little bit later. I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm also a son. I'm fortunate enough to have my parents still alive. So today, on the 1st of June, I feel both in terms of congratulating the young generation and also receiving the blessing of having still my parents around. About the diplomatic profession, I think we can talk a lot, and I'm looking very much forward to it. But I have a few points that I would like to make to you, and some of them may be repetitive because I'm sure you already know about them. But when we speak about diplomacy, I think there are three historical landmarks that we need to take into account. The first is 1648, the Peace of Westphalia, ending the 30 Years' War. 1648, basically, the peace treaty was signed in two countries in that German county, two towns in Osnabrück and Münster. And this Peace of Westphalia, 1648, is considered the starting point of modern international relations. The seeds of principles guiding international relations, such as the inviolability of borders, the non-interference in domestic affairs, and the sovereignty of the states, were sought at that treaty, and they were obviously the result of some very bloody conflicts that shaped the history of Europe and the world history in this regard. The second historical landmark is the Vienna Congress, in 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars, when the European political order was established, was initiated after, again, a bloody conflict that put forth the need for countries to come together and to talk to each other, to organize a harmonious system of relationships. And the third one is marked by the Vienna Conventions, 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, 1963 Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. These are, if you want, the constitution, the founding documents, founding treaties that guide still at this moment the diplomatic profession. History. One personal remark that I always like to point out when I talk to younger colleagues. I consider you my colleagues, although again I'm not a law expert, but I hope some of you will try to go to the diplomatic field. So the second one is that diplomacy is a profession and it's not a moral quality. They may go together, but I'm a little bit skeptical when I hear diplomacy mentioned as a personal quality, a moral quality. It is to a certain extent true, but a diplomat needs to be well behaved and needs to seek consensus, but not necessarily the people who manage to have a consensual life, consensual relationship in their societies, in their families, are qualified or are thinking about becoming diplomats. Diplomacy is a profession based on rules, treaties, and customs. Customs play a lot of weight in our job. The third point I would say about diplomacy is that it has a lot to do with law. We're talking about international law, and the diplomacy is probably the most important tool in promoting international law. You know, when diplomacy ends, war is called to ultimately regulate relations between countries who reached the end of their means of negotiating their divergent positions. So diplomacy is a tool of international law. Definitely, the difference to domestic law is to be considered. Another thing that brings our jobs together is that we need to understand, to look at the other party's points of view, to be empathic, but at the same time scrutinize the other party's positions, understand its reasoning, in order to better promote your own positions. A diplomat is, if you want, it's his or her country's barrister, not judge. Diplomats are citizens. They may agree or they may not disagree at a certain point with the government's policies. If they agree, all they have to do is try to understand them very well and to have very documented positions, and then they are good in their jobs. If they don't agree and they consider there is no way they can reconcile their moral positions with their jobs, then the only thing they can do is quit, and then they can express themselves as freely as democracy allows. Then they become analysts, they become journalists, historians, or fiction writers. But in principle, and this is maybe a challenging point, diplomats' personal points do not matter a lot, in the sense that we are not here to consult each other about how we feel about things. We are here to convey, to argue, and to convince of our country's positions. It's more about, it's much above personal conclusions. Another thing I think it's important, and maybe we can come back a little bit later about this, is the terms now going to a specific class of diplomats, which are the ambassadors. You hear this ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, ambassador, chargé d'affaires, consul. There are two, for ambassadors, there are two meanings of this word. An ambassador is the highest diplomatic ranking, is the general, if you want, equivalent of a general in an army. So it's the highest diplomatic degree, highest diplomatic ranking that you get through a number of exams, passing exams, and acquiring seniority. But the ambassador is also the head of a diplomatic mission, the head of an embassy based in another country. The ambassador is that called extraordinary and plenipotentiary. An ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary cannot have the ranking of an ambassador. He can be one of the lowest ranking, not very low, but could be a minister plenipotentiary, even a minister consular, which is the second and the third in line as diplomatic ranking. But the ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary is a position, whereas the ambassador simple is a diplomatic ranking. The difference is that you hold this position for a limited number of years, but you hold your diplomatic ranking for the whole period of your activity. Two very small points, and then I'll invite your questions. You hear about bilateral diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy. The Hague is one of the very few points, maybe Vienna is also one, where bilateral and multilateral diplomacy mingle. I am ambassador of Romania, ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, to be fully precise, of Romania to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. That means I am a representative of my president in relations with the Dutch government, and I have presented my credentials to His Majesty the King. At the same time, I'm a permanent representative of Romania to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. I'm representing my country in the dialogue with the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice. So I am serving as my country's envoy to the Dutch government, to the Dutch business community, economic representatives, to the Romanian citizens living in the Netherlands by our consular services. But at the same time, I'm representing my country in the multilateral formats that are unique to this capital. So these are the international organizations in the field of international law, but not only international law, which are based in the Netherlands. I said that Vienna is somehow the same, but because Vienna holds both bilateral embassies as well as representations to multilateral organizations, but they have different ambassadors. So Romania has two ambassadors in Vienna. One of them is accredited to the Vienna government, to the Austrian government, and the other one is accredited to the OSCE and the other organizations that are based in Vienna. Last point is the implication of Corona on the diplomatic life. These are very powerful, and they are here to last. One of them is that we meet now in person. Otherwise, I would have had the pleasure of visiting you or inviting you to the embassy. And I think there are good things to be learned from our experience in this internet-based platforms that are here to stay, even after we are able to meet. And you understand. But again, this is final. Diplomacy is about people. It's not about exchanging information, but it's about relations. And it's very difficult. Maybe your generation understands it differently. It's very difficult to build up relationships by remote link. Thank you very much. I spoke a little bit more than I promised, but I'm sure that we can have time for you to interact. I invite your comments, not only questions, comments. I was exposed to the activity of ILSA. My son was an ILSA graduate in Bucharest. He graduated last year in the Bucharest Law School, and he was ILSA member. I met the ILSA ILSA organization in Groningen. At the same time, I'm here in the presence of ILSA. I don't understand exactly which ranks which, and if you are Europeans, you can belong to both. But of course, your comments and your questions are a great interest to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your speech. You covered a lot of our really broad questions that we had, and you really covered everything we had. But we still have some others that we got through the online platform, and also some people sent them to us in private. So from our side, we are really curious about the fact that you have mentioned before that besides your position as an ambassador, you have worked in various other positions, such as the National Coordinator for the EU Danube Strategy and Political Officer in Washington, and so on. So from your point of view, which work experience would you say has been the one that pushed you the most in terms of future opportunities arising out of it?
Thank you, Camelia, and congratulations. This is a way a moderator should prepare a meeting. So before inviting people to break the ice, you have to have the first question. I call it managed spontaneity. So it's good, not only in diplomacy, but in real life. You have to be able to be spontaneous, but at the same time prepare a few cards. What you listed there are some of my positions as a diplomat. I've been doing this business since 1992. 1990, as Romanians know, and of course others, but for Romanians, although you are probably, you don't have direct memories of that, was a landmark in the history of Romania, not only of Romania, 1989, 1990. So in 1990, I managed to turn my hobby into a job. There was law that there was a College of International Relations that was created, and then it became a National School for Political Science and Administration in Romania. It was created in 1990, and I applied to it just to test the waters, and I managed to graduate it in 1992. I graduated this 2 years course and then took my master degrees, and so I had a lot of positions. I suppose your question goes to my personal experience, both in capital as well as abroad, and obviously it's maybe like in the case of emotional attachments. The first one is very strong, maybe even the strongest. In my case, my first overseas posting was Washington, D.C. 1995 to 1999. And that was, I think, what shaped me as a diplomat, because I had the opportunity to work with very bright colleagues, very good ambassadors. My first ambassador is now the Deputy Secretary General of the of NATO. And I had a lot to learn. And of course, the US was a totally different world to me, and I was eager to absorb the principles of doing diplomatic business in that capital. But to sum it up, I think serving in various countries is not as a diverse experience as you may think. Diplomacy, first of all, as I see it, is not about visiting country. It is about living in countries and understanding the people and interacting. I don't like to travel. I don't like to travel as a tourist. I like to live in countries. I like to represent my countries in other societies. So from this point of view, as I mentioned, the rules that regulate our trade, our job, are the same. So the difference between serving in the Netherlands and serving in Greece, that was my previous position as ambassador, are not that much, not that wide as the difference, for example, in weather condition or in landscape. I would say, influenced, shaped by all the interactions I had with peoples that I lived among, with professionals in various countries. And I also think I left some of my own trace there. We call it somehow a sort of, I would say, a sentimental dialysis. Every time you go to a country, you take something from that country with you, you leave something from yourself in that country, and in the end of the day, you get a personality that's very multifaceted, and you develop your sense of empathy in the sense that I described, not necessarily being ready to accept everyone's point of views, but being very careful to listen to it, to try to understand the reasoning, just in order to better promote your country. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I must say you've had a very fascinating and diverse journey. So a couple of more questions from us ILSA members, then soon after that we'll move on to the Q&A session from all our attendees. As we all know, of December 2020, Bucharest has been selected as the seat of the European Cybersecurity Competence Center. So, do you think that this will have any effect on the relationship between the two countries? And if yes, why do you think so?
Well, thank you. Very, very pertinent question. Actually, the inauguration of this center took place yesterday. The President of Romania attended it. The Prime Minister of Romania, my previous, my former boss, the Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General of NATO, was also there. This Center of Resilience is a EU is bringing to the EU a contribution in one of the fields that have developed very much throughout last year. Because the concept of resilience, the concept of strategic, this resilience as part of the strategic outline of the EU, the one that now we're discussing as being the strategic compass of the EU, is increasing its relevance. This center is going to provide solutions, to provide options, analysis and policy proposals for EU and NATO lawmakers and policymakers in terms of preparing our societies for preserving their values in a world of hybrid challenges coming from natural or more than natural causes like the current pandemic, and also coming from interferences in non-military fields, non-military ways into the affairs of other countries. Democracy, as recently President Biden outlined, is not a form of government. It is a state of mind. It is an environment, a set of values that we live in, and sometimes, like the air we breathe, we take it for granted. But it is not so. Society has to be resilient, has to acknowledge that it's like in law, you have all the rights that you are able to defend, that you are able to understand and to promote. So I hope that this Resilience Center is going to be a center of excellence, a center of joining expertise and insights, and also provide options to increase the resilience of societies, national societies, EU as a whole, and Euro-Atlantic community in facing the numerous ways, the numerous challenges to our way of living. As a organization, as an agency, like all the other agencies, EU agencies and NATO agencies, it's not about promoting bilateral priorities and not about promoting the country where that agency is located. So Romania is just the headquarters, it's hosting just the headquarters of the center, but the center belongs to the entire Euro-Atlantic community of values, and will be representing the forward thinking of this community of value-based states.
Thank you very much for your answer, Your Excellency. We will now move on to the last question from our ILSA members and then move on to the Q&A. So on that note that you also mentioned about how important the collaboration is on a community level, we are more focused a bit more on the Netherlands for now. And seeing as Romania and the Netherlands have always had a close and lucrative relationship, in your opinion, what makes Romania and the Netherlands such a successful, closely cooperating country?
As I mentioned, countries that feel alike are coming together. It is both about values, about history, and as I mentioned in the beginning, a little bit about geography. So the need for European countries to come together was highlighted not only during the historical periods I mentioned, but also with the formation of the European Union, the European communities 60 years ago, but 70 years ago, I'm sorry. But countries coming together develop relations based on trust, mutual confidence, starting from political confidence to the economic confidence, to the investors' confidence. So once there is a certain degree and a growing degree of integration, a growing degree of being on the same page in terms of values and in terms of democratic procedures, then you can advance cooperation. You can, in confidence, invest money, invest expectations in each other's societies. The Netherlands and Romania have 140, more precisely, 141 years of diplomatic relations, and those are shaped by similar goals, by comparable commitment to the Euro-Atlantic arm of the European identity. Obviously, there are bilateral interests that bring these two countries together. There is a compatibility and complementarity, compatibility in the sense of systems of economic governance, social and political views, and complementarity in terms of opportunities. For example, in the agricultural sectors, there is complementarity that can benefit both countries. We are strong NATO allies. Joint exercises are taking place, and our armed forces train together. We are partners in the European Union. We are partners now in one of the most ambitious projects, the Conference for the Future of Europe, which is going to kickstart soon with its plenary. So also in terms of societies, and I mean the Romanian participants in this panel, in this project, are a proof of the compatibility and of the bridges between our societies, between our peoples, based on the common set of values that we share.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Before we move on to the next segment, and speaking of Romanian participants, I'd like to introduce the third moderator of today's event. She's a third-year law student at our university, head of Main Events Committee in ILSA, and one of our organizers of the ILSA Diplomacy Days, Mara Corlate.
Bună ziua! As mentioned by my colleagues, my name is Mara Corlate, and before proceeding with the Q&A portion of the event, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Your Excellency for accepting our invitation and for honoring us with your presence, not only as a fellow Romanian in the Netherlands, but also as a law student who is specializing in public international law and also deeply wishes to pursue a career in diplomacy and international relations, and also for agreeing to have this session today, as it is a national holiday in Romania. And also we know that your birthday is tomorrow. So on behalf of the ILSA HHS and everyone here, happy birthday in advance, Your Excellency. So that being said, thank you for all the answers to our questions. You have truly been inspiring. And we will now be opening the floor to questions from attendees. We already saw quite a lot of questions in the chat, and we will address all of them. And for those of you who are watching from YouTube, feel free to add your questions in the chat, and we will also ask those. But please be aware that priority will be given to the ones raising their hands, and you are more than welcome to introduce yourselves before asking questions, or you can just type them in the chat and we will read them out loud. So before starting with the questions from the chat, we actually received a question on social media before the event, and one that I'm also particularly keen on finding the answer. What are the possibilities for students to work or volunteer at the Embassy of Romania in the Netherlands?
For working here, you need to be a member of the Romanian diplomatic corps, or you can work as a local employee. To practice, to have a traineeship program in the embassy, you need to apply for it. There is all relevant information on our website. There is a process of programming, a process of vetting. As you know, here we work a lot with personal data, especially in the consular section. So that provides for certain restrictions in handling this type of information, considering that we work with passports, we work with personal applications. So the degree of openness of an embassy towards internships from outsiders is limited by the law. It's not let's say a very mysterious type of activity, but there are some restrictions. But I would encourage anyone who wants to know more about what we do here to apply for our internship programs, and of course to the extent that we can host their participation here. 2 weeks, it's basically 2 weeks, could be a little bit longer. Stage like that can be performed. Now with the possibilities that we have with online activities, obviously there are ways that you can get connected to some meetings that we have and experience my and my colleagues' way of working. For example, I have 2 monthly meetings online. One is with the representatives of the Romanian associations, communities, churches, schools, Romanian weekend schools. And the other one is a working meeting I have with the honorary consuls of Romania. Romania has 4 honorary consuls in the Netherlands. And about honorary consuls, obviously, this is a different category. They are not diplomats. They are not paid by the states. And if you want to find out a little bit more about them, I would suggest reading the novel by Graham Greene with the same title, The Honorary Consul. It's a little bit of an insight into the this position of honorary consul. But I would say the front door, the front gate for this activity is applying for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There are some exams that need to be passed, and then you take it from the lowest, from the less seniors, let's say, senior position, and you go up. But thank you, Mara, for your documentation. It's a trace of diplomacy. We need to know as much as possible about our partners and their birth dates and their previous positions. In the case of older diplomats, can give you some interesting hints. You may find people who have worked in your country, and then the bond is there.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So now moving on to the questions in the chat. There's a question from Atuli. So what, according to you, are some of the major achievements in Romania's diplomatic history?
Well, that is a challenging question, and I would say that countries need means of persuasion. Paradoxically, the more a country is powerful, economically, politically relevant, or militarily mighty, apparently the less it devotes too much emphasis on diplomacy, because it has its own might. You don't need to bring too many arguments behind a position of a very important international player, because those arguments are the existence itself of that international actor. In case of Romania, in terms of size and relevance, a medium size and at some point a small player in the European and global affairs, the need for a strong diplomacy is very relevant, and that need was expressed primarily during the times of the formation of the modern Romanian state. 102 years ago, 103 years ago, the Romanian modern state was created, and on the backdrop of world events following the First World War, world events, and the reshaping of relations between European countries, the emergence of sovereign states, the breakup of multinational empires, the need to redefine countries, identities, borders, brought forth a school of eminent diplomats. Nicolae Titulescu was the landmark figure in this field that put the case of Romania in front of the United Nations, and also convinced individual states that it is in their own interest to support Romania's becoming a sovereign and independent unitary state. So the case was argued that it's not only in the interest of Romanians to become a modern state, national state, unified, but also it is in the overall interest of peace and of Europe made of sovereign independent states. So this was the task at hand, not only showcasing your needs, but also your contribution. Some generations after the accession to the European Union, the accession to NATO, where vast works of diplomacy combined with national achievements that led us to being now also de jure part of the community of Western values that we belong de facto and by our own nature. So in a nutshell, I would say that crucial events bring forth brilliant solutions, brilliant statesmen and diplomats were among those who were skilled enough to present their country's cases in a forthright position.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Unfortunately, we do not have a lot of time left. So according to your schedule, how many questions do you think we may still get? Because we have a lot in the chat.
I'm ready to answer all of them. I was indicated that I have 1 hour, but anyway, I'm here. As you mentioned, this is a day off in Romania, so I don't have other urgent priorities. So we can keep it a little bit longer, as well as the organizers allow it. So it's up to you.
Great, then. I think we will continue with at least 2 more questions and see how much time we dispose of, if you agree to that. Would that be okay?
Definitely.
Okay, great. Milena is asking in the chat, and she's stating the following. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the insightful information. The comment regarding the ambassador being the barrister of her own country, not a judge, inspired me the most and made me understand even better the role of an ambassador. In this regard, what do you think is the most important skill a student that aspires to work in diplomacy should focus on developing?
Again, I'm challenged by your presence. Although unfortunately, I only see 4 of you. I would have appreciated if more of you would show their smiling faces. So challenged by your by the interaction with you, I would try to be a little bit provocative, and I would say that I think a good diplomat is the one who manages to hide his good legal skills behind a very open mind, because you know better than I do that law follows life. Life and international relations, even less so, cannot be ruled unless those rules come from life itself. So we need to be able to adjust. We learn. We have a legal background. You have a legal background, but you must always be ready to look at it from a practical point of view, from the point of view of promoting your country's interests, not only as paid employees, but also as citizens. You are doing the same. Even as students, you are promoting your country's identity. Your people are reflected in your presence, in the way you learn, in the way you speak, in the way you dress, in the way you interact. You're honorary ambassadors of Romania, and it's not an empty word. Of course, not. I'm speaking for the Romanian ones, but you are ambassadors to your countries because you have the heritage of your culture. But it's important. It's very important that an ambassador, the diplomat in general, has a strong legal background in international relations, and international law, European law are fundamental to his or her professional background. But at the same time, you have to be open to interact. You have to be open to listen, which is probably what you are taught to do. I recently participated in a Moot Court Europe event where brilliant teams of high school students presented their cases before International Criminal Court justices. I was fully impressed by them, and that was one of their conclusions. You need to understand the other side, what is motivating them in order to present a better case from your part. So I encourage you to look at your legal background as a living tool, as a developing, just a starting point, as a developing frame of mind, not necessarily leave yourself trapped by some possible legal dilemmas, but try to come out of it. But in the end of the day, diplomacy as well as law is about people. So it's about understanding people, is about trying to provide your team, your country, your government, your ministry with the most relevant information and then proposals, conclusions and proposals to advance your country's interests. And understand that in very many cases, these interests are not moving into a zero-sum game. You can identify ways of having win-win situations. Or in other words, again, I hope this is challenging for you, a negotiation where both sides end up a little bit unhappy is the best outcome. It's preferable to the one where one is smiling and the one is grumbling, because that will lead eventually to the revisiting of the issue.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And also, as you mentioned, to everyone who's watching, please feel free to open the cameras if you want to do so. We know that there are a lot of Romanian students who are watching, so you are more than welcome to show your faces. But moving to the next question from the chat, this comes from Diana. As a Romanian law student at the University of Bucharest, I am really concerned about the current pandemic's influence on international diplomacy. Do you think it has a real potential of having a long-lasting effect on how it is and will be conducted?
Yes, I mentioned this in my opening remarks. The effect is ongoing, but we, in the spirit of resilience and of renewal, are already witnessing the adaptation of the diplomatic means and skills to this new reality. We can exchange information by online meetings. We cannot interact. We cannot shake your hands. We cannot discuss about personal, let's say, areas of interest where we can find some common points of ground that would keep us going and developing also personal relations of appreciation, which build trust in our future exchanges. But at the same time, we can reach people in a more efficient way. As I mentioned, I have one meeting every month with the representatives of the Romanian community living in the Netherlands all across the country. And one of the great rewards for me was that those representatives were glad to talk to each other, not only to me and to my colleagues in the embassy, but they were happy to recognize themselves on this platform, say, oh, look, I know about you. We have spoken on the phone. We have been working together on this project or the other. I'm glad to see you now. I'm glad to also meet you on this platform. It is something that we have to live with. Obviously, old-style diplomacy is not demised. I am conducting introductory visits to my colleagues and to the Dutch authorities. I've been here for about 5 months, so I'm relatively new in town. So I'm conducting the traditional visits to my colleagues, especially coming from the like-minded countries, but also the big international players, conducting visits in person or online. I still think that diplomacy, as I've said it several times here, diplomacy is about people, but it is not without merit that we can meet and our heads of state and government meet in European councils online. Our ministers meet in European ministerial councils online. The UN General Assembly, which is maybe the let's say top international event of the diplomatic year in fall, in September, was conducted and can be conducted to a certain extent online. So we need to adjust to it. This is a reality that is going to be here for us. Some countries are more adapted to it. Some countries are maybe just starting. I think the Dutch system is the one that has been very versatile in adapting to this mode. I have colleagues in the foreign ministry here who interview me. I interview them from home. This was something that they did before, and it's here to stay. But at the same time, we cannot do diplomacy from your office, because what am I doing here in The Hague? I could stay in Bucharest and have online connections with everyone. And here, of course, there is a small, let's say, a small footnote. Ambassadors can be accredited to several countries, and they can be resident in one of them. So an ambassador does not necessarily need to live in that country. You have embassies where you have embassy level relations with countries where you don't have an embassy. That does not mean that you don't have ambassador level or embassy level relations if you don't have a physical embassy and a physical ambassador in that specific capitals. Those are called the multi-accredited ambassadors. I was, in my personal experience, I was twice a multi-accredited ambassador. First, I was ambassador to Vilnius in Lithuania, and accredited also to Riga in Latvia, because at that time we did not have an embassy. Romania did not have an embassy in Riga, so I would travel from Vilnius to Riga, and then I was ambassador to Helsinki and also accredited to Tallinn. By that time we did not have an embassy in Estonia, so I would travel from Helsinki to Estonia, and then I was there fully functional, but not resident. So the types of let's say, tele-diplomacy or of roving diplomacy, of traveling diplomacy, are long-standing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer, Your Excellency. It was extremely interesting. We have a hand up from Maria, so if you would like to take the floor.
Yes. Bună ziua și vă mulțumim foarte mult pentru această oportunitate. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm wondering, how does one of your normal days look like? And also, a second question, if you have always wanted to become an ambassador.
My best working day looks like this one. I'm dressed in a thin shirt with a light shirt. The weather is beautiful here, and I can really do what I like best, and that is share some of my experience and learn some things from you. And to a great extent, an ambassador, when he is posted, so the ambassador extraordinary plenipotentiary, has this great latitude and also this great responsibility of creating his own agenda. I mean, I have a mandate which is a broad-based mandate, but I have the means to promote it by whichever ways I can find best. The most important component of our activity is obviously the political dialogue. And here we do two things. One of them is interact, establish meetings, online or in-person meeting with representatives of the host country Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also Ministry of Defense, Minister of Economic Affairs, other representatives of the, let's say, analyst think tank communities, representatives of the business sector. So we approach them directly and we discussed with them the opportunities and the challenges in the bilateral relations. Second side of this political dialogue that an embassy is doing is facilitating dialogue between representatives of the countries. For example, I am working with the Dutch Parliament for organizing the interparliamentary dialogue, establishing agendas and dates and conditions for members of the Dutch Parliament to meet members of the Romanian Parliament and to discuss directly about issues that are of interest to them. A very important part of my day is reading and getting as good information documentation about what is going on in my country and what is going on in the Netherlands. We have followed very closely, for example, the vaccination process, the developing the roll of the vaccination process, which provided some good information experience to my country. So this is again a part of our day-to-day activity. We need to be updated. As a principle, of course, it's a rule of thumb that after you have read 10 pages, you can write 1 page of report or of some recommendations to your country. An important part of my day is focusing on consular affairs. We have a consular section that deals with issues of interest to the Romanian citizens in this country, and we are here to provide regular assistance, notary activities, legal activity, and also emergency activities. People sometimes lose their documents or find themselves in various positions where we can help them with an information or with some facilitation of contacts with the local authorities. An embassy cannot, as a general rule, an embassy cannot act on behalf of its citizens in other ways than by dialogue with the local authorities. So we don't act on our own, let's say, on our own initiative, but we consult with the relevant authorities, and they take the necessary steps in order to address the various issues that the Romanian citizen or Romanian community are dealing. And one example is we had every country has elections. We provide conditions for the Romanian citizens living in the Netherlands to vote in Romanian elections, parliamentary elections, government, general elections, presidential elections, and then we do this in coordination with the Dutch government, providing, first of all, the agreement for carrying on such activities. They need to be agreed by the host country, and also providing the necessary logistical conditions for it. And of course, I like to learn as much possible about the country that I live in. I try to look it also through the eyes of a tourist as much as possible, and look all as much as possible to the opportunities of promoting cultural activities and public diplomacy activities, such as the one we're conducting today. I am fortunate to have a good team of young colleagues. I like to work by delegating authority and responsibility. I like to work on subsidiarity principles, and I believe that the more I invest in my younger colleagues, the more comfortable it's going to be for me when I indicate the target. They produce the results, and I have to assess them. And I have always had the most refreshing experiences when I put my confidence in my well-trained colleagues. All I had to do was give them confidence and give them examples and try to conduct them, to try to lead them through my experience, where the more you advance in age and in experience, the less and less probable it is that you meet a situation that you have never met before. So always looking back at the experience, and look, it's okay. These things have happened. They will happen again. We have to deal with them in a logical and sensible way. So it's also about interaction. So the most important thing that a ambassador can do is interact with his team and with Portuguese other partners.
Thank you so much. I think it's very reassuring to hear this, especially as we are all young students, and hearing someone as yourself in your position saying that you trust the younger generation and you attribute diverse tasks for them is very, very reassuring. Thank you. There have also been some other questions in the chat, but you answered pretty much all of them. So thank you for all your questions and your answers, Your Excellency. Before we finish, one final question from our team, because I'm sure a lot of students are interested in diplomacy, myself included, and would be even more now after today's experience and hearing your answers, of course. So on that note, what would you like to say to the students who wish to pursue a career in diplomacy and are here with you today?
Diplomacy is not an easy trade. It's not a trade that you conduct from 9 to 5, but obviously there are very few of those, and I'm not sure you're interested in such things. Diplomacy is a way of life, but again, so are many professions. Diplomacy is addictive. Diplomacy is difficult in terms of personal relationship with family, with friends, and I think you have taken more than half a step in that direction when you decided to study abroad and to consider the possibility of working abroad. Diplomacy can be done primarily abroad. It's some people may be a little bit upset. There are eminent diplomats who are working in their capitals. They're preparing documents, positions, and they are without them it would not be possible to work. But the real diplomacy is about interacting with peoples. When I mean traveling to various countries and knowing those peoples, interacting with colleagues, and you have to before joining the diplomatic service, you have to consider this question: do you want to have roots or do you want to have wings? You cannot have both.
I must say it is definitely resonating with everyone. It was truly inspiring, sir. And I certainly speak for everyone when I say that we could not have had a more stimulating discussion with you today, and could not have had a better start to the second edition of ILSA Diplomacy Days. So on behalf of the Hague University of Applied Sciences and the International Law Student Association, the Hague Chapter, we'd like to thank you so very much for taking the time today and gracing us with your honorable presence. We'd also like to thank your office. Without their cooperation, this event would not have happened. And I'm certain our attendees today have learned a lot, sir, myself included, and especially from your last advice that you gave us. It resonated with all of us, I'm sure of that. Thank you, Your Excellency, a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, participants. I congratulate you for this program. I know you have some very interesting colleagues that are following, colleagues of mine from The Hague. I have a few favorites, a few personal friends among them. I will not disclose the names, but I know what you did already and what you're going to do. Please keep it doing like that, and it will be very stimulating also for the diplomatic corps in The Hague. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You have inspired us all so much, and we are so thankful for your support, both for us personal as students and for ILSA Diplomacy Days. And for our attendees, please do not forget that we have 2 more events this week with the Irish and the South Africa's embassies. For more information, please feel free to check our social media accounts. Thank you again. Have a great day, and vă mulțumim din suflet, domnule ambasador.
Mulțumesc tuturor. O zi bună. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you everyone for joining.